Welcome to the Cuzo Show, coming straight from the Windy City, touching on topics within the social and culture community of Chicago. Follow and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast. Here's your host, Levon, aka Cuzovon.
Today's episode is Good Habits. I got Will, personal trainer, health coach. But before we jump into the episode, you guys, for the latest gear, check out www.habit365.com for the latest apparel. Use my promotion code Cuzo to Cuzo Show for 15% off. That's CUZO to CUZO Show for 15% off.
My name's Harrison. I am a personal trainer and holistic health coach from Australia. That's what I do, to summarize it, to make it all understandable, is people come to me with a problem, right? So usually it is to lose weight and to sort of get confidence back in themselves, get back to a self-love. And how I help them and my passion and my purpose in my life right now is to give them a solution, and it's a holistic solution. So what that means is they come to me with this challenge, and I look at what they're eating, right? I look at their nutrition. I then look at how they're moving and exercising. I look at how they're sleeping, how they're mitigating stress, how they integrate recovery practices in their life, like yoga and breathing, how their mindset is. And I bring all these components together because I feel that when we do have challenges like this, whether it be losing weight and getting to a self-love, you need that holistic perspective. You need that holistic view to give a really good result. So that's summary of all the things that I do.
Sweet. So if someone comes to you and they need help with, let's just say like a workout routine regimen or programming, do you do that, or what's the steps do you take?
Yeah. So the workout routine, that's where I started, right? So I started as a personal trainer, and that's sort of my foundation. So people come to me and I design a routine that's best for them. But what I've found being just the personal trainer who just focuses on the exercise, when the people come to me with the routine, they end up doing it and they like it. But then some other things sort of kick in, right? Like, as you probably know, if we could be doing the best exercise in the world, but if we're going home and eating shit, then we're not going to feel good about the movements that we do, right? So people come to me and I make the routine for them. But what ends up happening is that they turn around like, okay, so what should I be eating? Or how should I know mindset is a big part of it all, right? Like we can feel like we're doing all the exercise in the world, lifting the kettlebells, doing the bench presses on the leg press machine. But then when we come into the gym, sometimes we feel like other people are looking at us, right? We feel weird, or we feel
judging.
Judging. That's it. So it's, I've really found that I help a lot with the movement and making routines, but all these other little elements end up seeping in, and I can't help sort of assisting with those as well, if that makes sense.
All right. Yeah, it makes sense. So do you do more one-on-one training or group sections, things of that nature?
So that's an interesting question. If you had asked me that like a month ago, 2 months ago, I would have said, I'm the person you find in the gym and we just do one-on-one sessions. But now actually I've transitioned to online, and that's how we connected, right? I'm doing a lot of outreaching to all the different social networks, and I'm building an online service for people. So I'm still doing one-on-one coaching where I do it in person, but I also provide online one-on-one coaching. But I'm also doing now group courses. So I'm doing an online program at the moment, and that serves like a group teaching environment.
Yeah. Now, I know the pandemic slowed everything down here in the US, but how did it affect living over there in Australia?
Hmm, good question. Um, so I'm very lucky to be, well, to one, to be in Australia, but to also be where I am in Australia. I'm in like a small beach holiday town, so it has a relatively small population. So if you didn't know COVID was happening and you were living here, you wouldn't know. Like we had like a lockdown for like a week, and then everything opened up again, and there's people wearing masks, but that's about it. But but then when you look at some of the big cities in Australia, like Melbourne, for example, Melbourne was hit pretty hard, similar to how stuff is happening in the US. So I would say up and down here. I think because we're such a big country, Australia is a huge country, but we have such a small population. I think we were lucky enough to sort of dodge a lot of the major lockdowns, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I know I'm in Chicago here in the States, and we open up and then we go back into like phase one. Like everything is shut down, no eatings,
Mm,
no gatherings of group size of 10. Um, everything is remote. And just recently, CPS, Chicago Public School, just went back this past, I want to say past month, right
mm,
after Christmas break. And now the charter schools are going back, I think April, sometime in
mm,
April. But they having teachers come in, 1 or 2 days, well, 2 days, and then they off until next week. That they breaking it up, which is kind of weird, but
mm.
I guess it's to keep the number count and possibly, the spread of the COVID-19 here in Chicago. And certain states I went to, like Georgia, it was like everyone it's free for all. You could go to the clubs, you could go to the stores, you could go to the malls. And it's like that in Miami. I just recently came back from Miami. It's the same exact way. And I understand here in Chicago, due to, we have the winter and the flu season, really, really bad. So they really trying to like keep the number count really, really down, but it's hard to do here as well.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, like what you're saying, I think it's probably one of the worst parts of everything that's happened to us over the last, year, however long it's been, is the uncertainty of it, right? That you're talking about,
Yeah.
and the sort of, I think it makes sense what you're saying about Chicago being, the flu season is a lot worse there. So then obviously the restrictions are going to be different, but that doesn't help the average person that is trying to work out how to live their life, right?
Yeah.
It's just it's unpredictable, and I really feel for you and people in the US, because there's so much fear, right, and uncertainty, and it's a bit hard to avoid that with everything that's going on. And I think where we met, for example, we met on Clubhouse, and I think
Yeah.
that's a perfect example of it's sort of swinging the other way, where people are wanting this to fill this space of fear and uncertainty with love and connection, right? And I think that's why Clubhouse and some other platforms are sort of doing a bit better now, because people are trying to move out of that fear and insecurity with connection in any way that they can.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Everyone around, like California, for example, certain parts is just completely locked down. Like you can't do anything.
Mm,
So it's like day one all over again in certain
mm,
states here. And I know that will affect, your sleeping habits,
mm,
your workout routines.
mhm,
Um, so what would you recommend for someone who is on lockdown, like certain states in the US? How would you
mm,
program? Because even me, like I found myself, you know, going to sleep at weird hours of the day and being tired throughout the day, just because you can't you can't get out and do what you are norm to doing. And then here in Chicago, we had, snow days. Like it snowed, 24 hours, 48 hours straight. Now you can't even go outside for a walk, even if you want to. So how would you program, or what would you recommend for someone that's in my position here in Chicago? Like, you can't go outside anyway because the snow. You can't go outside because of the COVID restrictions. But I want to get out to go for, a jog, a walk, um, things in that nature. What sort of program or fitness program would you recommend?
Good question. There's a lot there, but how I would first approach that is I would try and make it as simple as possible. Okay, like it's so easy to be like I said, we don't need any more things to overwhelm us and to fill us full of anxiety and fear, right? So you don't want that to be your fitness or your eating or all the other habits. You don't want that to replace that. So where I would start is I would look at trying to set up a routine. So it doesn't matter what it is. Start by setting a routine with all the healthy habits you can do, right? So that counts for your eating, that counts for your exercise, that counts for your sleep. Okay, you want to get those into a pattern because our body works on a rhythm. It works on a cycle. And when we are like you said, some nights going to bed at 12 p.m. or some nights going to bed at 9 p.m. and then eating sporadically throughout the day at different times, right? That's just going to throw our body off even more. Our body innately is there to help and support us, and it's always going to adjust to the stimulus that we give it. Okay, so the best way that we can support our body and support our health is by making sure all the good things we can do for it are in a structured routine, and that's what's going to give us that foundation. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. So the next place I would take that is, so the three big things you want to focus on first, like I said, is the food, is the movement, and is the sleep. So first step would be to set your morning, like the time that you wake up, try and make that the same time every day of the week. Okay. Like I understand, right? People have jobs and sometimes that can be hard, but do your best, right? Because when we can have that structured, that initial time that we wake up every time in the morning, our body is going to match that, and it's going to give us the hormones, and it's going to give us the feel good feelings to match where we are. So that's step number one. Make your morning time, and I'll get there at the end, but your bedtime relatively the same time every day. The next step, what I would do is, when you're talking about exercise, the first bit of exercise you want to do in the morning is you want to aim to do some low to moderate aerobic exercise, preferably before breakfast. Okay. And I would suggest this to be outside. So if you are lucky enough where it is not snowing and it's not horrible weather outside, you can go outside for a little bit. Make this your priority in terms of the time of day that you can get outside, because when we go outside, we then have access to another powerful element that can help us modulate our health, and that's light, right? That's sunlight. Yeah. So when we go out in the morning with the morning sun and the sun hits our skin, it sets our body's clock for the rest of the day, right? So that sets how we feel, our hormones, and also how we're going to inevitably be tired at the end of the day. So I would pair this connection to the sun with some low to moderate exercise, right? And that can be walking, that can be swimming, that can be doing some stretches in the sun. Again, try and make it basic, don't overcomplicate it. If you can add the extra element of doing it in a fasted state, so meaning that you haven't had breakfast yet, what that's going to do is that not only is that going to help with your cognition for the rest of the day, but it's going to help you push your body into more of a fat burning mode. So if you are someone that is trying to lose a bit of weight, by doing that fasted aerobic exercise in the morning in the sun, that's also an additional element that's going to help things. Does that make sense?
Yes. And that brings me to my next question. Do you recommend fasting? Um, and what would be the extent of fasting? Because I know they have, they start you off gradually, 10 hours. You just move your breakfast, a couple hours after you get up, and you use your sleep, for, the 8 hours, and then you just push your breakfast 2 hours. How do you program, or how do you get someone in the habit of, going, 16, 24 hours of fasting?
You're asking all the good questions. So fasting is a gigantic topic, as you're probably aware, right? And there's so many little parts to it. But again, I'm going to come back to what I was saying before, is to make it simple. Okay, so like you said, fasting, it's amazing for us, and I think it's a very good practice, especially for weight loss, but just for general health in general. So where I would start a beginner is, I would make it simple. Just start with something called time restricted eating, or intermittent fasting, and it's the idea of restricting the window in which you eat in. Okay, so make it a 12-hour window. So you say, for example, you have breakfast at 8 o'clock, then you stop eating at 8 o'clock, right? That's an easy one. I think everyone can do that. That's the minimum. So I would do that. I would start with that at first. So first meal, 8 o'clock, have lunch somewhere in the middle there, and then have dinner before 8 o'clock, and then stop all eating and coffee and alcohol, everything else outside of that window. So I would start with that and then see how that feels for you. And then I would progressively squeeze that window in. So you can go down from 12 to 10, and then ultimately, 8 or 6, but it varies on you, right? I think some form of fasting is beneficial for everyone, but we are so all unique, right? We have our individual traits. We're biochemically unique. So different kinds of fasting will be good for different people. So I would try that. So start with the 12 and then squeeze it down to 10, go down to 8, and then see how you feel.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Because I do fasting, so I don't eat after 8, and my first meal is, at 1.
That's good.
So I know my body. Sometimes I have to go, I do the OMAD, like 1 meal a day.
Yeah.
But the next day when it's time to eat, it's like I pig out. So my question would be, what would be some of the foods would you recommend for someone, who just started fasting, but it would fill them, throughout the night and right before they break their fasting?
So,
because I know oatmeal, like fibers. They say that. Typically, what I do, my first meal, if I do get hungry before my fasting is over, I have a cup of black coffee.
yes.
Some individuals drink tea, but it holds you over. But I know when I first started, the beginning, like the first week was terrible. Like my energy level was down. I was real moody. It was crazy. Even though you don't recognize these things, and then you like a week go by, you like, man, I was really grumpy to this person and that person, and it's because my eating habit, like I didn't get the carbs I want. And I know a lot of bodybuilders, when they get on the low carb, high carb diet, they really get moody. So what would be, that's why I was asking, like, what would be like 5 foods, or 3 to 5 foods that would, keep that filler?
So this is another deep topic, but I'll try and make it simplified. First of all, that moodiness you're talking about, what that is an indicator of is that you're reliant on carbs, right? Like you said, you're reliant on, when we get that moodiness, our body is that's a symptom of our body craving carbs that should normally be there, right? So
Yeah.
craving that glucose from the carbs. What you can do to overcome that, rather than sort of thinking about the foods that are going to help with that, I would first see it as it's a stage. Okay, so what fasting helps us do in general is that it helps us become fat adapted. So what that means is that it helps us shift from relying on carbs and glucose as our main fuel, i.e. in the symptom that you're talking about with the moodiness, and it helps us shift into using fat or ketones as our main fuel. And that's something we have on us all the time and have access to all the time, right, in our fat cells.
Yeah.
So in terms of helping with that craving and helping with those moods, what you need to think about is in the diet that you are eating when you do break your fast, you want to kind of prioritize the fats. And what some tactics that I would do to help with that, before I get to the actual food itself, you mentioned the black coffee, right?
Yes.
Black coffee is a really good one for helping you get through it. But I would tweak that a little bit, and I would add either MCT oil or coconut oil to that black coffee to help with that fat adaptation transition. So because when we have the goal of there's many kinds of fasting, right? But the main one that's popular, and I'm guessing it's the one that you're doing, is we're using fasting to help us with that fat adaptation, but we're also using it just for longevity and cell breakdown and healthy cell maintenance, right?
Yes.
So the things that are going to stop that in terms of breaking the fast, the things that are going to stop that are proteins and carbs themselves. So when you eat those things, that moves you out of that stage. But if you add a full just fat, right, so i.e. the MCT oil or the coconut oil to your coffee, that's not going to push you out of the fast. It's not going to push you out of that kind of fast. So when you're talking about the craving, when we add that fat, not only does that help with that craving, but it also helps us shift into that fat burning mode more efficiently. Does that make sense?
Yes, makes sense.
And then you're talking about when we then break the fast, I would prioritize, I'm not, I think there's a diet for everyone. Like I was saying before, we're all unique, and I don't really push one kind of diet. But when we're talking about in the context of fasting, you really want to make that first meal. I would prioritize it with some healthy fats, right? So, what I do when I break my fast, I have some eggs, I have some avocado, I have a little bit of nuts and some salmon and some fish, right? I have carbs in there as well, right? Some tomatoes, some salads, and spinach. But the big percentage of my meal is fat. So again, that's telling our body that that's how we want our energy to be used.
Okay. Yeah, I recommend fasting for everyone. For health reasons, for weight management. That's a good one. And I've been fasting like my entire life, even when I was younger. But I didn't know what I was doing. It was just, I just didn't eat because I wasn't hungry, or things in that nature. I was just busy or just, more active and on the go. And as I got older, I'm like, oh, like everyone's like, yo, you still look the same. Like you didn't gain any weight. Like, what are you doing? And I sat down and I started thinking about like, yo, what do I do on a day-to-day basis? And then I'm like, hold on, I fast, and I've been fasting my entire life, but not even, it's like second nature because it grew on me over 10 years, 15, 20 years. And then next thing you know, it's a lifestyle. So I never like thought about it. Like, how you would recommend it for someone, if they come to you like, oh yeah, Harrison, I want to lose weight, or I want to, maintain my weight. And you'll recommend that, opposed to someone like me that been doing it for decades, if that kind of makes sense.
I'll jump in there. I think that perspective that you have of having a habit like this, the fasting, and it just being part of your life, and that it's just how you live. That's how we should approach all of these healthy habits, right? Like
Yeah.
it's good to be like, I'm going to go to the gym every day for an hour and do the bench press and all these things. But if that commitment is difficult for you and you can't maintain that, and it doesn't make you happy, and you're just doing it because you think you have to do it, then that's not long term, and you're not going to see change in that. No matter um, how much weight you do, you might see quick change, but long lasting change like you're talking about, it's not going to be there, because it's not sustainable, and it's not something that is adding to you in a healthy way.
Yeah. Now, I know you was like, go for a walk or work out. Um, just say, like, if, like, I know you program a routine, or you do a program unique to each individual.
Mhm.
Um, but just say, like, someone, like, their schedule is just out of whack. Like, they
Mhm.
work 12 hours. When they get off, especially like single moms or single parents, um, they have to pick the kids up. They got to do dinner, and before you know it, it's like 10, 11 at night,
Mhm.
and they have to do it all over again. 5 or 6 in the morning, because they have to get up, a few hours early. Get breakfast ready for the kids, get ready for work, and then get the kids ready for school.
Mm.
Like, what would you recommend someone to do? Would you recommend for them, like, on a typical lunch break, to take their walk while they
Mm.
still in the fasting state, or how would you go about doing it
Are you talking about in the morning specifically, or just throughout the day?
throughout the day? So just say,
Yeah.
like I'm just throw up a random. All right, I get up, I get my day started at 5.
Yeah.
Um, it's just hypothetically, like, this ain't my schedule, but just say, like, a average working day. I get up at 5. Um, you know, I prepare breakfast for the kids. Um, 6 o'clock, 6:30, they are up. They getting ready for school. By the time they finish that, breakfast is finished. I gotta shoot them to school. Then I gotta shoot to work, and just say I gotta be at work at, I'm just say 7,
Mm.
and I don't get off until, I'm say 6:37.
Mm.
Um, pick the kids up either from daycare, babysitter. I go home, make dinner, get them ready for bed. I do little things around the house, and then next thing you know, it's like 10, 11 at night, and I got my day start all over again, and it's
Yeah.
rinse, repeat.
Yeah. So, how I would approach this is, first of all, yes, get it in where you can. So, like, stack it on top of things, right? So, if you talking about the walking, for example, if you can't in the mornings before you go to work and take your kids to school, you can't actually get outside to go for your walk by
Mm-hmm.
yourself, then stack that on top of what you're doing, right? So if you're making breakfast for your kids, add some squats into the breakfast, right? Add some, instead of sitting with the kids to eat breakfast, stand up, move your legs, lunge a little bit. It's about stacking them together. The other thing I would say, you want to try, when we're talking about strength training, I think strength training is an important part of a routine as well. So not only that morning fasted cardio, you want to have some sort of strength training involved as well, whether that be with weights. But if you're in this instance, right, with this schedule that you're talking about, that's probably not going to be possible, but you can do body weight stuff, right? And
Yes.
when we're talking about doing strength training, there are two things you want to look at to try and fit it into this kind of schedule. One, you want to do the most effective exercise that you can. And when I think of effective exercise, it's the most muscle groups. Okay. So those are going to be things like that body weight squat. There's going to be things like a push up, like a pull up, or a overhead press, right? And those things you can do throughout your day with just body weight, right? So if you can't get away during your work again, but you do have a lunch break, then on your lunch break, start incorporating these sort of functional movements on the ground. Start doing the squats, do some sort of push-up that you can do. And I would add on top of that, with strength training, to make it effective, if we're doing those big compound movements like the squat and the push-up, if you want to enhance it, do it slow. Okay, so if you have 5 minutes, if you have a 5-minute break before you have to go back to work, in that 5-minute break, do 2 repetitions of a push-up, but make it 10 seconds down and 10 seconds up. And that will be just as effective as if you'd done, 10 minutes of 3 sets of 10, right? For example,
Right.
at normal pace. So it's about doing lots of muscles in one hit, and it's adding a slow speed to it. The last thing I'd add to this is it's probably a little bit controversial, but I really believe it to be true, is that when we have a busy life like this, right? If we're talking about a mum and a dad that's, getting up early, take their kids to school, make them breakfast, then go to work all day, and then come home and again be there for their kids. You can't be there for them. You can't help them and support them and give them love if the place that all that's coming from is unhealthy and is not at the optimum place that you want it to be. So I would try and find balance there and try and allocate in your busy day just 5 or 10 minutes where you're only concentrating on yourself, right? You're filling up your cup so then you can give it to others, right? So we're not going to be our best selves if we don't allocate at least a little bit of time for ourselves. And again, I get it with the crazy schedules that people have, but even just 5 minutes where you're doing some of these slow movements, you're going outside for a walk in the sun, that's going to be enough to just add to you so you can give to other people around you.
How would like the eating habits? I know, the fasting, and I know we touch bases on, the meals, the foods that we eat.
Yeah.
How would you structure someone eating habit, you know, throughout the day? Like, would you recommend, every 2 hours, every 3 hours, up until, they start back fasting?
So let's, because we talked about before with a lot of different types of fasting, let's use the 10-hour window as a sort of general example, right? So say you have a 10-hour feeding window within your day and you're fasting outside of that. How I would view that is you want to try and get those 3 standard meals in. There is a balance between not eating enough and eating too much. And for me, in the clients that I work with and in my own experience, those 3 meals balance that perfectly, right? So you want to start the first meal that you start your day with, like your breakfast, the breaking the fast, wherever that is in your day, right?
Okay.
In my experience, you want that meal to be relatively sizable, right? You want that to be a big meal, like you said that you talked about feasting after your fast. If that's your breakfast, then that's good. Okay. Then you want to. I like 2 to 3 hours. That's a good break between meals. And then you have a lunch meal. That meal can be relatively smaller. It can be a snack if you don't feel hungry, just as long as we eat something. And then have a dinner. The reason that having 3 meals and like not eating enough and eating too much, why they can be troublesome is it's stress. Okay. So by not eating enough, that's adding extra stress on our system. By overeating, that's adding extra stress on our system. And through the lens of weight loss and having a healthy body overall, we want to balance stress in general. Okay. So I found by shooting for that 3 meal a day mark, and again, doesn't matter how big they are, as long as you're telling your body that you are eating, then that's an effective way to help with that stress. And it's also a good way for mitigating weight and just health in general.
Sweet. So where can certain individuals find you on what platforms?
Yeah. So I'm on all social media. My main ones that I'm spend the most time on is Facebook and Instagram. You can find me at Harrison Meagher. That's Meagher spelled Meagher. Harrison normal spelling. And yeah, you can send me a DM on Instagram or a message on Facebook. I do have a website, but I contact people most directly through those social medias. Um, I do programs like I mentioned, but at this point in time, I'm just open to people reaching out and seeing how I can help and support them best.
And also, what about Clubhouse? Do you host your own rooms? What rooms do you mod?
Yeah, yeah, I do. So at the moment, I'm jumping around everywhere because I'm so addicted to Clubhouse at the moment. But I do host a room. At the moment, it's pretty sporadic. If you go on there and follow me at the same, so at Harrison Meagher, you'll find me. But I do host a room almost every other day around everything we talked about today. So the holistic health, fitness, nutrition, all that sort of stuff. So if you just find me on social, find me on Clubhouse, and you'll see when I'm doing rooms.
Sweet. And also, you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Cuzo to Cuzo Show. That's the number 2, not T-O, not T-W-O. That's C-U-Z-O, the number 2, C-U-Z-O show.